I want to touch on a few different areas of cloud configuration that are easy to harden. So for example, looking at how secrets are being stored. Now there are multiple levels we can talk about here. So for example, are secrets just stored in configuration files in the application? Might that pose a risk if, say, the source control repository is exposed? Or might that mean that the developers have access to those secrets in the source code? Conversely, is there a native paradigm within the cloud service to store those secrets? Let me show you what I mean. I touched on this earlier on in cloud computing risks, so let's just have a quick look at it again now. If I drill down into the Hack Yourself First website, and then scroll down to my application settings, further down this particular blade, I have things like my app settings and my connection strings. This is the construct that Azure provides to store secrets. Here's the one we looked at earlier on, the app setting called mySecret with a secret value. Now this is sort of a bit of middle ground security-wise. We get the secrets out of the configuration files, away from the developers, away from the source code. However, they are also retrievable here via the portal, so there is a bit of a risk there. The more secure route, whether it be via Azure or by another cloud provider, is to look at what sort of key vault implementations are available. So can you put this in an HSM, like I spoke about in the last module on cloud computing security strengths, and actually get it away from being redisplayed anywhere in plain text? So have a think about the options that are available for the way secrets are stored. The next one to think about is whether any unnecessary services are running. Now this is a security premise which holds true no matter what sort of environment you're in, cloud computing or a more traditional model. You don't want to be running services that you don't need, simply because if those services possibly have some sort of vulnerability in the future, that could leave you unnecessarily exposed. You may also find there's actually some performance gains by disabling unnecessary services. But the real point here is to try and rule out potential attacks by anything that doesn't absolutely positively need to be there. Let's jump back to the Azure portal again, and I'll show you what I mean. We were just over here in the application settings looking at how to store secrets. But if I scroll up a little bit here, we'll notice that there are a number of general settings for other services. Now what you can see here is things like the version of the .NET framework I'm running. We can also see the PHP version. Now the reality of it is that I don't need PHP on this site. I could turn that off. So here's the ability to disable a service that I simply do not need. So let's disable PHP. Java is already off, as is Python. And finally, my WebSockets are also off. I'm not using any sockets for this application. So let's go and save that configuration, because I have been able to strengthen things just a little bit by disabling PHP. Look at what is enabled within your cloud environment. You may not be able to disable everything you don't need, particularly in a platform as a service style model. You may still be subject to what your cloud provider wants to run on the platform. But where available, go and disable anything you don't need. The next one here is excessive database writes. And this is a really good example of this juncture between usability and security. Let me show you how easy it is to make this mistake within Microsoft's portal. Let's imagine we're going to add a new resource. Now the resource that we're going to want is going to be a database, which is down here in data and storage. And we'll just go and take ourselves a SQL database. I'm just going to jump down and select the server and say, let's create a new server. And what you're going to see here is the ability to give our server a name, which is fine, and then create a server admin login. What actually happens when you create this login is that you have an account with the maximum possible rights. It can do absolutely anything that you need it to do in order to manage that database. The risk that I very frequently see here is people then use that account not only to set up and configure their database, but for the web application to connect to it. So now what's happening is you're getting anonymous users browsing the website and then causing that website to make connections to the database using an account that has elevated privileges. This is a real risk for things like SQL injection. So what needs to happen in the Azure environment is that you have to then go and create another login with just the permissions it needs. So you need to apply the principle of least permissions. This is an explicit step. It is something that you have to go and do above and beyond just setting up a new server. And because of that, it very frequently doesn't happen. But that's a pretty important part of hardening the configuration. Let's go and look at one more thing. One final thing to think about is who can actually purchase resources. Now this is really important, and it also relates to the role-based access controls I spoke about earlier. At multiple times already through this course, I've touched on how easy it is to provision cloud resources and how expensive they can get really quickly. We looked at things like economic denial of sustainability when resources become over-provisioned. So you want to be very, very careful about who actually has the ability to create resources. Because as we saw in that earlier example where someone published their private key into GitHub, you can rack up a very large bill very quickly. Not only that, but this can go the other way too. Someone who can purchase resources can usually delete them as well. So whilst this does relate back to the previous clip on role-based access controls, I wanted to call it out again here because it is so essential. So think about who has control of purchasing. That's hardening the configuration. Let's go and look at something a bit different.